Awesome. Well, welcome everyone. Yes, as Ben mentioned, thank you for the introduction. This is our AI Practical Implications and Perspectives panel. I'm Sherwin, I'm the VP of Engineering here. I'm personally quite interested in AI, but I'm more excited that we have these wonderful panelists here. So I'll give a quick intro to everyone. We have Hana from, Hana, you're I guess, an industry UXR consultant. Is that right? And then we have Maya from Thumbtack, where you're a research coordinator. And then we have Cathrin from ServiceNow, where you're a senior UX researcher. Hope it's a really, really great discussion. And as we go through different topics in AI, if you have questions, please pop them in to the Q&A, and we'll hopefully have some time towards the end to get to some of these questions. So I thought maybe to get us started, we could actually just hear a little bit more about each of your organizations. So the first question I'll pop out to the group is, in the current organization you're working with, what does the current adoption of AI look like? Just to get a little bit of background. And how are you, what are you considering as you're sort of moving through that problem? And maybe, yeah, go for it.
Okay, cool. I can kick us off. Hello, everyone. I'm excited to be here today. So for ServiceNow, and this was around AI adoption, right? We are currently actively building AI experiences or building AI into our platform. From the UX research perspective, it is all about like earning our users' trust. And this is how we're approaching our research and design, and where I see my role as a UX researcher to be a champion for the user or the human as we're bringing AI into our products. This kind of further also means we're trying to deeply understand our users' needs, but also their concerns and what needs to be part of an AI experience to be trustworthy for them. And then, of course, we're also paying attention to like ethical considerations and how we can make sure that we create AI experiences that adhere to best practices for like AI governance or responsible AI to minimize the possibility of harm to users, or, for example, minimizing inaccurate responses. So that's where we are at.
Cathrin, thank you for mentioning the ethical perspective. We'll definitely put a pin in that. I want to get to that later. But let's actually pop it over to Maya. Let's hear a little bit more about what's looking at Thumbtack.
Sure, yeah. So, hi everyone. I work for Thumbtack. Thumbtack is an online marketplace for homeowners to care for, maintain, improve their home, and be connected with local service professionals to hire. So as a whole, definitely still in the kind of discovery phase as a company on like how, where should we implement AI. Some of the first things that come to mind for me are on the homeowner side or the customer side, the like search experience. And, you know, when it comes to home projects, it's not always a cut and dry answer like I need to hire an electrician or a plumber because I know exactly what the problem is. We really want to be able to have more of a dynamic experience where you can kind of describe the problem that you're encountering and find the right person to contact and reach out to. And yeah, lots of other places that we're thinking of bringing it in. But like Cathrin said, those ethical responsibilities are large, and you know, data security, trustworthiness, the integrity of what we're launching is always important too. And then just as a research coordinator handling the research operations side of things, it's definitely becoming a really great tool for me in my day-to-day work stream as well. So a lot of really exciting possibilities here.
One just quick follow-up question, just out of my own curiosity. Could you share a little bit more detail about how you're actually using AI yourself in your own practice as a research coordinator, and then
Yeah, definitely. So I've mainly been leaning into AI for more kind of repeatable, routine, a lot of operations, as some might know, come with a lot of that kind of administrative, logistical work. So I have been a team of one, for several years, and so I consider it kind of a partner for me, to, if we're trying to target a really niche audience, like a very specific type of service professional, and I'll, have some help with the screener crafting, of how do we get at, what who we're trying to target. It's been really helpful with things like, our tool stack as well, which I wasn't initially expecting, but it's been so helpful to like compare different tools and software, do kind of like a side-by-side analysis, evaluation, and even drafting like emails or communications with vendors, any kind of negotiating that we might have to do. It can just help me word things in, the best way, and being able to then go in and kind of add in my own voice, and things there. So again, kind of those like uh, routine, not super high stakes work streams, but yeah, it's been great to just like double check something, or um, get some more like thought starters out.
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing that. I've definitely found in my own experience, I think, at least with the AI tools today, I often think about it as like having an intern that you can hand off tasks to, but you definitely need to review the works for a lot of the low stakes stuff where like I'm going to review this personally before it goes out. It's not like a mission critical thing, but it does save you a lot of time, like drafting an email or writing up a initial like brainstorm of questions and so forth.
Exactly.
Right, and then let's pass it to our last panelist here, Hana. So you work with multiple organizations, so I'd actually love to hear your perspective on how you've seen different organizations approach their adoption of AI, both internally and then also in their feature set.
So one thing that stands out to me when I'm thinking about this question is different levels of complexity and then risk. We talked a little bit about the impact of inserting AI into the space. We're thinking about AI within enterprise spaces, and really broadly, I would say in enterprise spaces, we would use AI to oftentimes reduce operational costs with some of those kind of routine or repetitive tasks, or to speed up user tasks. And in those spaces, when we're designing, developing, deploying, we're trying to think about how to assess the impact of automating decisions in those spaces, and then what the task might be connected to within that kind of framework. We're thinking about things like SAP or ServiceNow, those really large enterprise systems. They're really large frameworks that plug into other frameworks. So trying to think about what is in scope for us to impact and kind of what happens when we make modifications in that task flow. Whereas when we're looking at things in the public sector, and there's a lot of really exciting uses for AI in the public sector as well. There's a different level of risk tolerance that the public sector might be comfortable with when you're looking at organizations such as provincial or state, maybe fire safety, that are using AI, for example, to make estimates about upcoming forest fires. The amount of risk tolerance that they have may be different than a private enterprise, and then the amount of control they have over which applications kind of plug in is also different. And then on the academic side as well, we're starting to see folks really think about the impacts of when and where it's appropriate to use new tools like generative AI, both on maybe the instructor side of it as well as the student side. So those are some of the things that stand out to me when I look at different sectors and the applications of it.
Love it. One immediate follow-up question that comes to mind here is actually, you mentioned, for enterprise, one thing that people care a lot about is actually assessing impact. So maybe I'd actually move to this topic of how do we actually think about measuring the impact of either a new feature that you're building or the rate of your adoption? Yeah, how do you actually approach that?
So something that I use as an approach, and Cathrin mentioned this as well, is when we're thinking about who our users are and what they're doing, I like to start to kind of expand that concept of user needs. So we have our primary users, we have secondary and tertiary users. And when we have users, we're thinking about folks who are creating actions, creating information, and folks who are consuming or on the receiving end of that. And when you're automating a task through AI or automating a process, how can we expand our understanding of users as people who produce or are impacted by, and then trying to work out if we have intended consequences or unintended consequences. We don't want to have these kinds of blind spots in our system where we've automated a task and that has an unintended impact, something that we didn't have a research question around or we didn't yet explore. When we're automating something, we want to make sure that it's leading down this kind of chain of reactions when we get to the end business results or social impact that we're designing for it.
I'm curious if we could get a perspective on what's this looking like at either Thumbtack or ServiceNow. How you're all thinking about measuring impact.
So from like the employee experience space, thinking about bringing generative AI in and having, for example, the goal that, employees can quickly self-solve if they need information or if they need to request something at work. So a success metric here would be something like improved deflection. So can they actually find what they need in those specific moments themselves? And we know they have a high desire to self-service and self-solve without having to contact someone for help. So this would be kind of one area or one success metric to think about, especially in those kind of experiences, and how AI might impact this ability for the user to successfully complete a task.
Yeah, and I'll add, I really love what Hana said and what I've heard before around when a task is automated, when you bring in AI, like what is being removed, what's being taken away, and like which part of the human element might be missing. So while keeping that in mind, I always think about impact as change, like what change directly as an outcome of this project, work stream, process. I think for Thumbtack as a whole, a really great indicator of success with the implementation of AI would be really helping the homeowner go through the whole journey from exploring what they need to get done, what their project is, who they need to hire, to the contact phase where they're reaching out to pros, having pros reach out to them. And, up until now, that's kind of where it ends. Like you find a pro to hire, you get your project done, and that's that. But we really want to create an experience that kind of sees through the result of that interaction and that connection that was made on Thumbtack. So whether that's sending reminders for ongoing seasonal maintenance or allowing you to kind of visualize like the next room and see what it might look like painted a different color with some shelving installed. So really creating like a way to not only get a project done, but have like your whole home thought about and kept in mind by this tool, by Thumbtack. And on my front, on my day-to-day, it's really, productivity and efficiency, I think, is the the main like win or impact for me, and just being able to free up my time by streamlining and automating some of these things so I can more strategically support the researchers and the team and our vision. So yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
The
Sorry, go ahead.
comes to mind here too, right? Freeing users up from maybe more repetitive task to, be able to focus more on meaningful work as well. Building trust comes to mind too, because if we don't have trust, we don't have product adoption. Right. And so how can we build experiences that are meaningful for users, so that they actually want to interact with the AI experience?
Yeah. It kind of sounds like a theme that's emerging here is that, I mean, it sounds like we all plainly recognize that AI really hits the sweet spot of automating these repetitive tasks, these things that are, whether it's your own work or something that your product is serving for your customers and users, something that's repetitive and is sort of low stakes that can be taken care of. Great. But I think what I'm really excited about is actually thinking about, and this gets to what you were saying, Cathrin, about what is it like to create something that's like additive in value rather than just reducing a pain point, actually like creating something new. And Maya, what came to mind when I was hearing you talk about what that could look like at Thumbtack? It's like, whoa, if you could literally see a visualization, take a photo of your countertop, and then the AI just like shows you what it looks like if it's replaced, done in this way, or it could help generate ideas. Like, oh wow, that's like not actually something. That's not just automating something that was repetitive, right? That's actually something new and novel. So really curious if you all could share any perspectives or thoughts or considerations around this sort of upside of AI rather than this sort of like, oh, let's mitigate the boring sort of rote work.
Sherry, can you clarify that question?
Yeah, sorry. The question here is when I'm curious if any of you have been thinking about what using AI either in your own work or in how you allow your teammates to self-serve, or in a feature that you're helping build or research for that is doing something that goes beyond simply automating away something that is sort of tedious or repetitive, and actually doing something that, oh, a human maybe couldn't have even done. And maybe the answer is no, right? Like we're not quite there yet. But curious what you all are thinking about on this front.
One thing that comes to mind for me, and this isn't, the most novel thought, I'm sure, but in terms of bias checking, I think it can be a really great tool to maybe evaluate a discussion guide as part of a study plan, or internally, like employee to employee, when review time comes around. I think it's great to be able to feed in like what you're considering releasing, and, tell me if there's any leading questions in this discussion guide or in this script. Tell me if, I'm using gendered language in my review, or just kind of flagging those unconscious biases, I think can be really valuable and just improve our overall, inclusivity and equitability. So yeah, that's something that I think is new, and nothing's really being removed there. It's just like an added layer of rigor.
Yeah, thinking like about my own use, I think I find value in it for like flow creation, helping me get started and think through what could be a good flow for, something I want to maybe present or write on, or just get some creative ideas, different ways of expressing something, especially as not being a native speaker. I find this in English, it's sometimes helpful to just kind of broaden my vocabulary, especially on like creative expressions. I think for like work, what I'm hearing is the help with like entering maybe into a workflow, right? Knowing what are the next steps I can take, what could be possible solutions for it. So that's kind of areas that we heard that it can be helpful, especially for like a persona, like an employee who's looking something up, but also wants to know what can I do with this information now. So it's not just finding information, but also doing something with it, or entering into a workflow from this.
Yeah, maybe I'll actually share one thing that I found in my own use of AI tools to be quite valuable, that goes beyond sort of just like automating something simple, is actually if I'm attacking a sort of complex problem that I haven't solved before, in my own work, it could be like, oh, we want to roll out this new process or something, or we need to think about the trade-offs of this policy that we want to implement or something. I think I would just like, reach out to my network, ask other people who have done this, maybe read some blog posts about other companies or organizations that have gone through this change, and then try to think through it. More and more nowadays, I also think about, I still do that, right? But then I also will just ask a chatbot, like, come up with a plan on how to do this, and what I would do is I'll ask it to ask me questions and find gaps in my own thinking, right? So that asking it to say, like, what other things should I consider that I haven't mentioned, that I haven't covered? What are the unknown unknowns that I'm not really thinking about? And you can just sort of use that as like a thought partner. And I've actually found that to be quite useful in a way that, I think that goes beyond like, oh, you're just like an intern that's like giving me, back and hand off a task to. This is actually like pretty valuable stuff. And Hana, did you have anything else you want to share about this? Otherwise, we can move on to it. I did want to get to this question about ethics, but
Yeah.
I'll give you.
I have like a thought. It's a dream that I hope will become a lived reality at some point. Is seeing more AI in healthcare space. There are an enormous amount of regulations around how you can use AI like to assist people with managing health. But as someone who has type 1 diabetes, and so I do use a lot of technology to help manage blood glucose, for example. And I do a lot of like mental calculations about how things like the weather will affect blood glucose. Eating and then walking as opposed to walking and then eating. And there are folks who have started to build their own interventions around this. And there are regulatory reasons why companies are not releasing their own platforms that will take that additional step with it. But I am hoping that government regulations around technology use will move quicker in the coming years. And we can start to see some more tools that can help offload some of that labor and make some suggestions. This is not a space where we'd want to make to automate all of those decisions because that can be quite dangerous, but we would want to make recommendations and suggestions so that folks can take some of that load off. So that's something I'd love to be involved in. I'm always exploring, seeing what kind of like startups, et cetera, in that space, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, that's a great call out. These sort of domains where it's really high dimensional, a lot of data, a lot of complex factors that, you could have a human, I think about like doctors who are just doing diagnoses as an example. Like, yes, you can go through med school and do a whole bunch of training for that. But it's also a case where if you have a safeguard in place, the AI can do a lot of that. It takes, as you mentioned, take load off. Yeah, that's really valuable. But I think that's also kind of a perfect segue, since we were talking about regulation and what is safe and so forth. I think I want to go back to what we talked about at the very beginning, which is the ethics of any of these sort of approaches. So I think that's a super broad category and a very deep topic. but maybe I will start off by just asking each of you to share, like, what is top of mind when you think about the question of ethics in AI for your own work. And maybe Cathrin, we could start with you, since you mentioned this in your very first response.
Sure. Obviously, ethics are top of mind when we're creating or thinking about AI experiences. We, as in like ServiceNow, have developed robust internal human-centered AI guidelines, which I think are soon publicly available, currently not, and that allow us to build trustworthy and responsible AI. And UX research has been an essential part of informing these guidelines. And as I mentioned before, building trust is at the center of our AI experiences. And how can we ensure that we're doing this, but also, are ethical in our approach. We are also using the standard ones like transparency or accountability come to mind, thinking about privacy and fairness as a compass when we are introducing AI into our platform or integrating AI into our platform. Additionally, for ServiceNow, we recently joined the AI Alliance, which is an international community of like leading technology developers, researchers, and adopters that are promoting for open and safe and responsible AI. So yeah, it's woven into our practice as we're creating these experiences.
I guess I'll jump in next. Something that's really top of mind for me lately is thinking about accountability within these systems. So when we're looking at something like Boeing, for example, which has been in the news a lot lately for both hardware and software issues, at some point, there are folks within, the executive team that make a certain amount of decisions, and so you can point back to them in kind of a chain of command. But when we are creating these large frameworks, some of which have AI in certain parts of them, but not the whole thing, there's distributed accountability through both software processes and human processes. There's a really great research paper. It's only a couple of pages long. It's called The Moral Crumple Zone, and it really delves into how this will become a challenge that we need to think about, especially as we start adding it into our public sector services. Or areas of, for example, enterprise software or private sector that intersect with public sector. So the example used in the Moral Crumple Zone is the self-driving car that was, navigated by human and crashed, and who was accountable for the death of the cyclist. This is something that our regulatory approaches are really far behind on, and something that we as designers, as researchers, as engineers should also kind of have in mind when we're thinking about the inputs and outputs of what we're designing.
One immediate follow-up question is, I guess, what do you think is lacking in our regulatory framework? Is it just sort of across the board, it's just slow, and this technology is moving so fast it's hard to keep up, and a lot of regulations sort of face that challenge when trying to regulate technology? Or what recommendation would you make? So
this is a really big question, and I'm going to try and answer a small part of it.
Great.
When we we're looking, I live, in Canada, but I'm also an American citizen, so I'm kind of looking at both governments for this. I think especially for the American government, when you watch folks speak about technology, it's apparent that their understanding is rudimentary at best. And so we're hearing them make comments about different forms of technology, different platforms that are concerning in how they reveal how low their understanding is. And it's just the way we've set up our governments. We elect certain people to do certain things, and then there are kind of these like specialized groups that help suggest make things better. Some of our laws are split in between, the judiciary system and then other parts of the system. So it gets complex in there. But because of the way we've set that up, it can be really challenging to get a group of experts together and make a decision about something. It's very slow. Even something I was mentioning, diabetes technology before, the app, for example, that I use to manage glucose, because of the way the regulations are, it needs to mirror the analog device exactly. So that means that the analog device, which is not very tech forward, the app that mirrors that has literally no information. And there's multiple other apps that I have to use that plug into it and actually get the information I need. And that's from a regulatory perspective. It both protects people, but it also causes a range of problems. So when we're looking at governments and relying on them to kind of pass laws to protect both consumers and users and the companies developing as well, I don't know if, at least the way that like these governments are set up, if that's something that we can think of happening in like a timely manner. And by timely, I imagine like 2 to 5 years. And in the meantime, AI especially is going forward at such a rapid pace that it far outpaces the regulations that we have to inform, ethical development, ethical deployment, data use, etc. And I think that's increasingly kind of coming to a crux, especially as all these kind of private sector organizations are creating, alliances to try and think about some of that themselves. So we're seeing it be more an industry-led conversation rather than a government-led conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good frame. Thank you for the great overview of that. Very, very deep topic. Maya, I also wanted to give you a chance to speak on this since you mentioned ethics as well. Want to hear how you're thinking about it at Thumbtack.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have sort of a tech council that goes through a review process of any new software or existing software with new AI features, when it comes to security and privacy. I think on, more in my realm, as a research team, we are the champions and advocates of our users and their needs. And I think while AI can be a great tool for, things like analysis and synthesis, we're not quite to the point of just letting that be as far as we go. Personally, I think it's still so important to do all of this double checking. We want to make sure that we're representing our insights as accurately as possible. And the stakes are definitely higher when it comes to something like home projects as well. Like if we're guiding folks towards a certain maintenance plan or renovation idea, like these are expensive and time-consuming things. And so I think we don't want to lead people astray. We don't want to be connecting them with the wrong type of professional help for what they need done. So both making sure that we're as accurate in describing what our customers need internally and continuing to be that champion of their voice, as well as just making sure that we are doing everything we can to avoid those kinds of pitfalls when it comes to making these recommendations for people to follow that have financial ramifications.
Hana, I would also kind of want to follow up, since you mentioned you've worked both in academia and with enterprise like Thumbtack and ServiceNow, and also the government sector and the public sector. curious whether you think the approaches of, like Maya, you mentioned the Thumbtack, you have like a review board or a committee to sort of guide some of this sort of stuff. Do you think it's a good thing that the industry is sort of just forging ahead and trying to create these alliances and sort of self-regulate in some way?
I think that there's a positive element to getting folks with deep knowledge together to formulate structure around it. There is a kind of self-serving danger in it as well. I think especially in areas where industry has a lot of influence on how governments pass regulations, etc. Because of the way the rules are in Canada, this does happen a bit less in Canada as opposed to America. But there are challenges around allowing lobbyists to have this kind of influence. We've seen that with some issues in like banking regulations, for example. And so we're kind of, my impression, and I don't want to say that I'm an expert in this area, but my impression right now from what I know is that we are walking this fine line between having a lot of expertise in industry and those folks developing the in practice applications of what it means to build ethical, responsible systems, etc. But how that translates to what should be a third party that is not invested either way, like the government. How much they'll take that in is, I think, up in question. Awesome. And one thing that I would want to draw it back to is in the moral crumple zone, for example, which in that case, they ruled in favor of Uber. They ruled in favor of Uber, meaning that the individual piloting the car was deemed responsible. But there's a lot of questions around that. Was that an ethical system? Who is actually accountable in this distributed model? And since we're talking about precedents, etc., like now that's set a precedent that when we have an artificial intelligence system that has a human in the loop, the human is responsible for the end outcome in that system. And that may or may not be where we want this to go, but it's kind of happening and we're seeing it play out. So there's going to be a lot of debate around that for sure.
Yeah, I think the specific example that you mentioned in that paper just makes it so vivid as like, whoa, this is a clear case where there will be really, really challenging ethical and philosophical questions that we need to sort through. And I think that's a really clear case because, it's a car, right? So literally lives are at stake. But I would also love to hear from cases where it's maybe, I think some people might have a potentially misguided perspective that, oh, if I'm just writing software, it's like not a big deal, right? But I think that's a dangerous line of thinking, even if your software isn't operating a self-driving car. So I'd actually love to hear maybe Cathrin, if you could speak about how things that might seem lower stakes at ServiceNow, but still the ethical perspective is really important. If you could share an example of something that comes up as like, oh, wait, we actually have to consider the ethical perspective of this decision when it comes to AI.
So just to clarify, in terms of like product, like if we think about users using AI and potentially using it for like decision making, right? I think about, which is not my area of expertise, but I know a little bit about like the agent persona, right? Maybe using it to help with a case resolution, right? And making sure they're aware, for example, that the output might not be, or most likely is not going to be 100% accurate, and needing to check the AI generated output before using it, or even like moving it forward to the requester who they are helping with a problem. Or like if I'm thinking about employees around like maybe sensitive HR information or data, yeah, it comes to mind like, yeah, sorry, can you repeat the question? I'm not sure if I'm going into the right direction.
No, I think that was spot on. I just wanted to, in case we had folks in the audience who are sort of thinking about, oh yeah, of course, AI ethics are important where you're operating a self-driving car, but if we're just making an app, maybe it's not a big deal. But I think the examples you just mentioned are like, that was exactly what I was looking for. Thank you.
Yeah, and obviously it's important that we're transparent, right, to users that they are entering an AI experience, that they're aware that they're interacting with AI, and yeah, highlighting if there's like output that needs to be checked, set expectations, what the system can support and cannot support, because we often hear in research that expectations are heightened once users know that they're interacting with an AI experience, and kind of making sure they're aware about system capabilities and yeah.
Can I jump to something
Yeah,
that Cathrin mentioned? When we're designing to enable an understanding that folks are engaging with artificial intelligence, something that I think is important in this space as well is designing for an understanding of what is included and excluded by AI. And so an easy, maybe low stakes example is on Google Maps, when it is showing or suggesting certain restaurants, etc. Well, suggesting a certain route, and then on that route, it's suggesting certain restaurants, etc. And some folks may understand that behind that application, there are a range of AI models. But in just kind of my day-to-day, I found that there's not as many folks who are aware with what is being included or excluded, and then will be, surprised that there is or is not something on that route, and the ways in which certain business decisions are feeding into that. There's obviously a vested interest by Google to not advertise all of that, but understanding how the model is operating and why it's showing you certain pieces of information. That's something that I think as researchers and designers and engineers, it's a bit harder to grapple with, because it is not always aligned with business interests, and how we kind of implement the ethics of that, I think is something that we're working through kind of as a community.
Yeah, and to add on to this, I mean, providing sources, right, and information where the for lack of where information is coming from is something that we're really particular in when we're creating or designing AI experiences, and that the users in control, right, they can easily access this information to make an informed decision.
It definitely seems like a lot of the AI features that I see nowadays always have that little disclaimer at the bottom saying like, oh, this might not be entirely accurate. Like, we sometimes link to sources. You should go verify those sources. And also just like, it's a little bit like, use at your own risk. And I do think there's possibly going to be a sort of like a societal cultural norm shift where AI literacy becomes really important, where you need to understand when you're using any app, whether it's something like Google Maps, in the example that you mentioned, Hana, or like your Instagram feed or whatever, where you're like, oh, there's an algorithm generating this. I need to understand that, like what the implications of that are for what I'm being shown and what I'm not being shown. Right? It's not. There's the possibility that things aren't always in my best interest. And just being aware of that becomes quite important for all people. All right, I think we have maybe time for one last question before we turn it over to the audience Q&A. So I think my last question for each of you, if we could just go around and share, if there's one other idea or example or story, framework, piece of advice, whatever, just one thing that you actually want to share with the audience about AI. It could even be a question that you're thinking through right now. What would that be? And don't mean to put you on the spot here. So maybe take a little bit of moment to think about this. So just any sort of like parting thought or idea, challenge, and so forth. because I think this has been a really, really valuable discussion. And want to, my hope is that this sort of sparks more conversations down the line. So I want to offer that to the audience. So could we maybe start with you, Cathrin?
Was it me?
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, so to send on the way, I think we talked about it, but also, yeah, make sure we're always checking when the output when we're interacting with AI, right? Don't just blindly trust it. Another thing that comes up to mind is like prompting, and how can we help with this like mental model shift, how to successfully prompt with especially conversational experiences to get the best out of it. No longer just keywords, but being more descriptive and more conversational in the prompt. In terms of resources, I find podcasts very useful to stay on top, because it is a very fast-paced space, and to kind of, just keep up, hear what's on top of mind. I recently listened to a good one around trust. I think it was on GitHub. Then it's like, and I'm really bad with remembering the actual names. I think one is like Me, Myself, and AI, that I found kind of a nice, like an easy to consume one. If you think about more like the research practice, obviously Nielsen Norman Group has published on this topic. Yeah, so those are like the initial thoughts that come to mind.
Great, a whole bunch of wonderful resources. Yeah, if seeing some people mention podcasts in the chat, if you have recommendations and you want to share with other people, please throw that into the chat as well. All right, same question. Let's pop it over to you, Maya.
I don't know if I have too much more to add right now. I mean, I feel like I'm personally far from a power user of AI, but I also know that it's something that's inevitable. I know there was a lot of like hesitation, aversion to AI, and there are so many different use cases, from something that's seemingly simple, like scheduling a participant for an interview, like making sure that the comms, like the copy that's being used, is still within, the Thumbtack brand, or even like my voice. Like I have so many, I pride myself on a positive participant experience. So if there's an automated scheduling flow that has the wrong time zone that was picked up by where someone submitted a screener from and shows them like incorrect times, like it feels so small, but it can really mess up someone's day if you've set aside time to meet with us. And so I really just try to think about what's the risk, and how just having that human connection, even just in my role, like not a researcher, but someone that's interacting with the people that we're learning from, and needing to really deeply understand. And I think just keeping the conversation going. We have, a couple Slack channels where folks are posting articles, podcasts, noting when they notice a new AI feature in a tool and sharing that, and just having that really open, transparent dialogue. And yeah, I'm looking forward to all the possibilities. And yeah, I feel like right now it almost feels like it evens out in terms of what's being automated and what work is being taken away, and then still needing to go back and check on things. So we're getting there, but yeah, really exciting stuff.
Awesome, thank you for sharing. And then Hana, what's your any final takeaways or things you want to offer to the audience about AI?
I I think my final takeaway would be something that I'm really aiming to do as I continue to be a practitioner in this space, is to be highly specific about the impacts that I'm researching and designing for. And that's kind of a guideline that I use to translate the philosophy of the ethics into the practice of developing and deploying and monitoring some of these systems.
Wonderful. And then maybe also, I think it's only fair I answer my own question, but I'll just offer a podcast that I've particularly enjoyed. It's a little bit more technical, just given my role in running the engineering organization. But the No Priors podcast goes into a lot of sort of intersection of technical product and business considerations in how companies are actually building with AI. Highly recommended. Great. Well, let's actually, so we have about 9 minutes left. Let's turn it over to Q&A questions. So we have quite a few questions, and hopefully we can get through a few. If you have additional questions, please drop it into the Q&A. You can click the Q&A button at the bottom to ask a question, and also upvote other questions that people have answered. So I'll actually start with, let me take a look. Alex, you asked a question. Is there risk in automating many UX research tasks beyond the skills of the researcher? It may enable less experienced individuals to high volume of outputs without having the skill or experience to discern the quality of those outputs. I think this is a very fitting question, given that we're all sort of thinking about the user research aspect of AI here. So yeah, we'll pop that out to the group.
I can jump in here. I would say yes. I'm not, broadly speaking, I'm not a fan of, at least right now, using AI to automate tasks that require judgment call. And a lot of research requires a certain, your synthesis of process is making judgment calls based on experience and academic training. So while it may speed up your process, there's probably a higher risk that it will degrade the quality. And I would say that that has both some ethical implications as well as business implications. And so at least for where we are right now, when we're looking at the ways in which we can implement AI into a range of user research processes, I'm remaining cautious, but optimistic about where and how we're implementing it.
I haven't really used a lot of support from AI in research for research tasks. I think user interviews uses it for categorizing participants when they pass your screener, but I usually also double check. And I do have found the occasional one that was, marked as not, I think 100%, but I forgot what the term is exactly, and who actually turned out to be a fit for the recruitment. So yeah, I probably prefer still like the hands-on and echo Hana's sentiment of quality, that it might lead to less quality if we're just relying on AI for those kinds of tasks.
Maya, curious with from your own experience and also from the researchers you work with, do you have a perspective on the risk of automating away too much?
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting question also around getting your hands on skills that maybe you don't organically have yet. And I think that's also kind of what the question was getting at. Like, is this tool and resource elevating me higher than I've gotten on my own, through my own experience and training? And I think it's really important to preserve that sense of ownership over your work, and be really steeped in it. When when you are using something like AI for your analysis, like you are sort of removing yourself from the user. And so I think that is a risk. And it's also, you know, our job as, I'm not a researcher, it's your jobs as researchers to be able to poke holes in things, be able to look at something critically and, you know, dig even deeper. Like maybe AI is telling me that users prefer a certain flow over another one, but the so what that comes after that, like, okay, great, but now what? Like, what does that mean? And what are the deeper implications of that? And being able to, you know, answer any questions or anything around what you're presenting still, and being able to defend it if you don't feel like you're fully on board with the output of something generated by AI. It's going to be really hard to continue to champion that work. So,
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. And quick administrative question here. Do we have a hard stop at 10:50, or do we have time for one more question?
You have more time, Sharon. One more
Awesome.
question, just fine.
Great. Let's do one more question. I actually really like this one. So there seems to be a high degree of optimism among the panelists about the future of AI, given the historic problems around that have arisen around AI and its impact on marginalized communities. What gives you hope that we can build a better future for all people while integrating AI systems? This might not be a 3-minute question, but if you, any quick takes on this?
My quick take is that I don't want to say that I have high hopes. I have a lot of concerns when I'm looking at, broadly speaking, the way that we treated historically marginalized communities, the way that we then built systems, codified that, and then built systems on top of that, and then built tech systems on top of those, real life systems. So if I'm just looking at tech, AI in isolation, amazing, very exciting. When I'm looking at the ways that AI is inserted into our systems, I'm hugely troubled by it. So that I want to be very clear. We're in the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of that come to head, let's say. And I think there's a greater understanding about the ways in which our systems are functioning as designed. And so some of these systems will have to be undone and then built in different ways if we want them to have different impacts. And broadly speaking, as we move towards inserting artificial intelligence into those systems, I'm hoping that we get more comfortable having more critical conversations where we're interrogating how we got to the space we are right now. And instead of that move fast, break things approach, we are moving slower, interrogating, undoing some of that work, and then building it differently.
I love that framing, right? We have to look at the system itself that is unjust or biased, regardless of whether you're adding AI or not, right? It's the system, the larger context that you need to keep in mind. But of course, AI can add a lot more danger to it because it just magnifies things in so many ways. Well, I think that is a good place to stop. We're just at time. I want to thank all of our panelists. This was a really, really wonderful discussion. Again, if you, I think we're using the same webinar chat. So if there are other resources or people want to continue to network, please pop that into the chat. And otherwise, I'll turn it back to you, Ben. Thank you, everyone.